honest discussion very difficult, almost impossible. Let us go on and look at the water cycle. Some Muslim authors claim that the Quran shows pre-scientific knowledge of water cycle. What is the water cycle? Here in this slide, you see 4 steps. The first step is evaporation. The water evaporates from the seas and the earth. Second step, it becomes clouds. Third step, it gives rain. And fourth, this rain causes the plants to grow. This is all very straightforward, and everybody knows 2, 3, and 4. Even if they live in a town, they know the clouds come and rain comes and their flowers grow. But what about step 1, the evaporation? You can't see it. It's difficult. And the Quran does not have step 1. Now we're going to look at a prophet from the Bible, a prophet from 700 BC, Prophet Amos, and he writes, "He who made the Pleiades and Orion, who turns blackness into dawn and darkens day into night, and then who calls off for the waters of the sea," stage 1, "and pours them out over the face of the land," stage 3. The Lord Yahweh is his name. And one other prophet is Job in 36, 26, 28, at least 1,000 years before the Hijrah. He says, "How great is God, beyond our understanding. The number of his years is past finding out." Stage 1, he draws up the drops of water, which distill from the mist as rain. That's stage 3. And then the clouds are mentioned, stage 2, which pour down their moisture and abundant showers fall on mankind. So here in the Bible, this difficult stage 1 is there from more than 1,000 years before the Quran. Now let us go on and look at mountains. The Quran has more than a dozen verses stating that God placed firm and unmovable mountains on the earth. And in some of these verses, the mountains are listed as either a blessing for believers or a warning for the unbelievers. One example of this is found in the Surah Luqman, 31, 10, 11, where the mountains are one of 5 warnings. It says, He has created the heavens. It says he has created the heavens without supports that you can see, and has cast El-Ka onto the earth firm mountains, Rawasiya, lest it should shake with you. In the prophets, Al-Anbiya, 21:31, as one of 7 warnings, we read, "And we have set on the earth firm mountains, lest it should shake with you, with them." Finally, in the B, Nahl 16:15, says, "And he has cast El-Ka onto the earth firm mountains, Rawasiya, lest it should shake with you." We see then that the believers and unbelievers are told that Allah has done this great thing. He's thrown down and placed the mountains so that the earth will not shake violently with them. Therefore, we must ask ourselves, what did they understand? In the next 2 verses, another picture is given. The news, An-Naba 78:6-7. "Have we not made the earth an expanse and the mountains as stakes, al-jibala otadan, as those used to anchor a tent in the ground?" And then the overwhelming, al-Ghashiyah 88:17-19. "Do they, the unbelievers, not look at the mountains, al-jibal, how they've been pitched like a tent?" Here men are told that the mountains are placed as tent pegs. Tent pegs keep the tent stable. So again, the idea is put forward that the mountains will keep the earth from shaking. A third picture is presented in the word Rawasiya, used for mountains. This word comes from the Arabic root arsa, and the same root is used for the Arabic word for anchor. To throw out or cast the anchor is El-Ka al-Mirsa. So instead of cast the anchor to keep the ship from moving, we have cast the mountains to keep the earth from shaking. From these pictures, it is clear that Mohammed's followers understood that the mountains were thrown down like tent pegs to keep a tent in place, like an anchor to hold a ship in place, to stop the earth from moving, i.e. limit earthquakes. But in fact, this is false. The forming of mountains causes earthquakes. Therefore, these verses present a definite problem. Dr. Maurice Bucaille recognized this and discussed them in his book, The Bible, the Quran, and Science. After quoting the above verses about mountains, he says, modern geologists describe the folds in the earth as giving foundation to the mountains, and the stability of the earth's crust results from this phenomenon of these folds. When asked about this, Professor of Geology Dr. David A. Young says, while it is true that many mountain ranges are composed of folded rock, and the folds may be of large scale, it's not true that the folds render the crust stable. The very existence of the folds is evidence of instability in the crust. In other words, mountains don't keep the earth from shaking. Their formation caused and still causes the surface of the earth to shake. Geological theories at the present time propose that the hardened crust of the earth is made of sections or plates, which slowly move in relation to each other. Sometimes the plates separate, like North and South America separating from Europe and Asia, and Europe and South Africa. And sometimes they go together, and they slide next to each other, and they bump into each other. And then they cause earthquakes. An example of this time of mountain formation is found in the Middle East, where the migration of Arabia toward Iran has resulted in the Zagros range in Iran. In many parts of the world, as one travels along the roads, one sees a hillside where the sandstone layers, which were horizontal when they were deposited, are now sticking up at angles. And so here you can see these sandstone layers, which were horizontal in the beginning, now they're sticking up at 75 degrees, where they were pushed up there by an earthquake, by the mountains being formed. Sometimes the plates get caught on each other and stop sliding. During this period, great forces are built up. When the forces of friction are overcome, the piece of plate that was stuck lurches forward, causing the shock wave of a thrust quake. And all of a sudden it goes thunk like this. In a recent earthquake, it was calculated that the Cocos plate in Mexico suddenly jumped forward 3 meters. Well, if your house suddenly jumped 3 meters, it would be a catastrophe. Another type of mountain is that formed by volcanoes. Lava and ash from inside the earth are thrown out and piled up until a high mountain is formed, even from the bottom of the sea. And we can see this kind of action in this picture. I hope you can see it. Not clear, is it? The ocean crust is right here, and the continental crust is there, and the oceanic crust is going down under the continental crust, and mountains have been formed here. Here's a volcano, and here is the magma, or the molten rock, going up through the volcano. And here's another volcano with magma going up. And so this is how the mountains are formed and earthquakes are formed. In the case of some igneous mountains, molten rock intrudes into the throat of a volcano's opening and cools, form a relatively dense intrusion, which extends below the surface of the earth. So if this got stuck and sealed, then it would be like a plug. However, it's not a root. It does not bear the weight of the mountain. It's really a plug. Therefore, on occasion, pressure builds up under the plug, and the volcano explodes, as happened in the South Pacific at Krakatoa in 1883, when the whole island was blown away. And it happened in Mount St. Helena in our days, when the mountain was blown away. We can conclude from this information that mountains were formed originally with movement and shaking, and that now, in the present, earthquakes are caused by their continued formation. When the plates buckle over each other, there are earthquakes. When the volcanoes erupt, there can be earthquakes. However, it is clear that the followers of Muhammad were understanding these verses to say that Allah threw the mountains down as a tent pegs or anchors to keep the earth from shaking. Throwing the mountains down into the earth may